The docking clamp groaned with the sound of old metal protesting diplomacy. The airlock hissed open on the eastern flank of Khalasar Prime, revealing a delegation dressed in robes that shimmered like plasma storms. They moved in perfect synchronization, as if choreographed by a hive mind with a flair for drama. Each step was an announcement, each breath deliberate. No one paid attention to the man crawling out of the maintenance hatch 2 levels below, dragging a spanner the size of his forearm and muttering something about ion filtration metrics. And how many times does a toilet need to beep before someone realizes it's angry? He stood up, wiped his forehead with a sleeve that had long since given up the pretense of cleanliness, and looked around. Everyone else was striding through high-security gates. Elia's Ray walked straight past the biometric scanner, gave it a pat like an old dog, and slipped into the main summit hall with the quiet confidence of someone who knew nobody would stop a guy who looked like he worked there. The Grand Assembly Hall was the size of a sports stadium and smelled like ozone, authority, and fear of career-ending missteps. Delegates from 27 systems had gathered here, most of them posturing with straight spines and glacial smiles. At the center of the circular room was the speaker's dais, a floating platform that rotated slowly. No one knew why, but tradition said it had always spun, and no one had the courage to argue with tradition or centripetal force. And there she sat, alone. Princess Elari of the Alaran Dominion, daughter of Sovereign Alaction IX, stood out without even trying. Her posture was perfect, her expression unreadable, and her long, silver-tinted ears curved like the wings of some mythical bird. She wore deep blue ceremonial armor that shimmered like oil under starlight, and a collar laced with threads of quantum silk, a fabric outlawed in 3 galaxies for being too aggressively majestic. Around her there was a buffer of 3 empty seats, not because of protocol, not because of accident, but because no one wanted to sit near her. No one dared. Elias noticed the empty chair next to her. He also noticed that his back hurt. He hadn't eaten in 9 hours, and the air conditioning in this room was clearly set to Ice Age. So he walked down the steps, ignored the stairs, and without breaking pace, dropped into the seat beside her with a tired grunt that echoed slightly. He pulled a protein bar out of his pocket, unwrapped it with the grace of a raccoon in a trash bin, and took a bite. The silence that followed was the kind usually reserved for pre-explosions. She turned her head slightly toward him, elegant and deliberate. He offered her the other half of the bar without looking. "Chocolate and algae," he said through a mouthful. "Don't worry, the algae flavor is surprisingly dominant." Elari didn't respond. She looked at the bar like it might contain a weaponized spore or a philosophical paradox. "I won't be offended if you say no," Elias added. "I've eaten worse things. Once tried Eshari street noodles. Glowed in the dark for a week." Her lips twitched, barely, but it was enough for the nearest diplomatic aide, watching through an ocular drone, to have a minor existential crisis. The summit began. Dignitaries rose and spoke in perfect cadence, languages auto-translated into the air via light pulse holograms. The speaker's platform kept spinning. Accusations were disguised as inquiries. Promises floated like soap bubbles, pretty and likely to pop at the first sign of gravity. Elias leaned toward her slightly and whispered, "Do they always talk this much and say this little?" She didn't look at him, but he could have sworn her ear twitched. "They've been arguing about encryption protocols for 30 minutes, he continued. "And I think one of them just declared war in iambic pentameter." She finally spoke. Her voice was clear, melodic, but low enough to keep it between them. "Their words are for their constituents, not for each other." He nodded. Performance diplomacy, like a reality show but with more sequins." There was a pause. Elari tilted her head slightly, a motion so refined it might have taken years of training. "You are not what I expected." "I get that a lot," he said, "usually after I fix things." "You're not a delegate." "Nope." "Why are you here?" "Because this chair was open, and because you looked lonelier than I felt." That gave her pause. "You presume much." "Sure, but I don't assume much. There's a difference." She didn't answer. Instead, she turned her gaze back to the center, where two delegates were now arguing about shared orbital rights, with the fervor of people trying not to admit they both wanted to mine the same asteroid for unstable crystals. A slight spark buzzed under the table. Elias looked down and saw the subtle pulse of an ungrounded wire feeding energy to the floating dais. He made a mental note to reroute the circuit later, or tell someone else to. The conversation around them swelled again. The Delvaxian representative accused the Aphiri ambassador of data manipulation. The Aphiri replied by uploading a real-time proof of integrity ledger. The Delvaxian's response was to ooze aggressively. Elari sighed. "You think beings who have mastered warp travel could also master not acting like children," she murmured. Elias leaned in conspiratorially. "Some children have better negotiation skills. At least they're honest about what they want." That time she smiled. It was small, barely there, but it changed everything. A ripple moved through the room. Not from their interaction, but from the realization that the untouchable, unreadable Ilaran princess was no longer isolated. The chair beside her was occupied. Willingly. No introduction. No treaty. No agenda. Just a human in stained coveralls, quietly cracking jokes while the galaxy spun on with the usual chaos. And somewhere, far across the Dominion, the first AI to run a behavioral prediction model on Elari's neural signature crashed and refused to reboot. The summit's second day began with a musical alarm from the station's public service AI, which had developed a fondness for classical Earth opera and refused to be reprogrammed. Most delegates woke to the sound of a soprano shrieking in Verdi's native Italian. The Delvaxians mistook it for an emergency and flooded the diplomatic concourse in combat posture, dripping ooze and demanding apologies from the nearest walls. Elias Ray, human engineer and unintentional diplomatic anomaly, slept through the entire thing. He showed up 10 minutes late to the main session, sipping synthetic coffee from a self-heating mug shaped like a miniature black hole. The mug occasionally distorted light around it just enough to annoy nearby physicists. Elias enjoyed that immensely. The same seat was empty next to Princess Elari. Delegates had made a silent, collective decision. That particular quadrant of seating was now unofficially considered radiation hazard, potentially cursed, or socially fatal, depending on which species you asked. Elias didn't hesitate. He walked straight to it, nodded at the princess, and dropped into the chair with the grace of someone who'd spent the morning fixing a jammed waste compactor with a crowbar and foul language. "Morning," he said, stretching. "Either someone's singing opera to wake us up now, or the station's life support system developed taste." Elari didn't look at him immediately, but her fingers twitched where they rested on the curved edge of the table. "It was not music," she said softly. "It was a declaration of sonic warfare." "I knew it," he replied. "Death by soprano." Her lips almost curved. Almost. But her posture remained statuesque and her voice retained its cool precision. "Your people are strange. Accurate. And stubborn. Extremely. And you seem proud of it. It's basically our brand." One of her advisors, seated 2 rows back, was clearly attempting to telepathically will him out of existence. Elias responded by yawning and flicking a small diagnostic scanner in and out of his sleeve, making it beep occasionally. The sound was oddly musical. Several species glanced around, alarmed. The Delvaxian defense protocols activated again. The speaker began. Today's topic was data sovereignty across wormhole-laced trade routes, a subject so dry that one of the Mezari delegates actually evaporated during the presentation. Elias spent the first 10 minutes sketching out a redesign of the station's fluid recycling network on his datapad. Every so often, he'd glance sideways at Elari, who sat still and silent, watching the speakers like a judge watching amateur performers. "You don't like these meetings, do you?" he asked, voice low. "They are a necessary theater." That's not a yes. It is not a no. Diplomatic answer. I am a diplomat. You're also very bored. There was a pause, then, I have killed for less. Elias raised an eyebrow. Really? No. Another pause, he grinned. You're messing with me. She finally turned to face him fully. You are unsettlingly perceptive. I'm an engineer, we read system, reactions, fluctuations. I am not a reactor. Everyone is, especially the ones who claim they are. A faint flicker of amusement passed across her features like a comet skimming the upper atmosphere. She glanced back toward the center of the chamber. The delegates were now arguing over the definition of transdimensional copyright. The Afiri representative had just claimed that her people's poetry existed simultaneously across 8 realities, and therefore could not be plagiarized unless you existed in all of them. Your presence here creates questions, Elari said after a moment. I thought it created uncomfortable silence and slightly improved seating arrangements. The Dominion Council believes I should not be fraternizing. I'm not sure sitting near someone counts as fraternizing. If it does, your empire has a very fragile definition of friendship. They're not wrong, but you're still letting me sit here. She said nothing, which makes me wonder, he continued. Are you just too polite to tell me to go away, or are you enjoying this? I have not yet decided. He smiled, took a sip from his coffee mug, and nodded. Fair enough. The rest of the session passed in a blur of semantic jousting and legally binding non-decisions. As the chamber emptied, Elias stood and stretched, joints cracking audibly. Do you ever get to leave this room? He asked. Elari hesitated. My schedule is structured, my movement limited, I'm watched, protected. Imprisoned. That is not the word we use. It's the word I'd use. Her gaze lingered on him. You speak as though you understand. I do, he said simply. I work with machines all day. I know what it means to be functional and confined. She blinked once. Then before she could stop herself, there is a storm garden on level C just beyond the South Observatory. It's off-limits to most. He tilted his head. Storm garden. Electroorganic flora, they respond to proximity and silence. That sounds illegal. It is. He smiled. When? Midnight. He nodded once. I'll bring snacks. She turned away sharply, but the faint flush along her cheekbones betrayed her. As he walked out of the chamber, one of the aides intercepted him with a forced smile. Mr. Ray, a word if you please. Sure, Elias said cheerfully. Want to talk about the toilets? I fixed the left-wing circulator. No more reverse suction, probably. The aide blinked. This is regarding your proximity to Her Royal Highness. There are protocols. Yeah, Elias replied, casually picking something out of his hair. And here's the funny thing about protocols. They're usually written by people who don't know when to shut up and sit down. The aide stared. Elias clapped him on the shoulder and walked away, whistling something suspiciously close to earth jazz. Behind him, the princess sat in silence, but her ear twitched, just once. The storm garden was hidden behind an access panel labeled Atmospheric Flow Maintenance, authorized personnel only. Elias didn't hesitate. He bypassed the lock with a handheld phase loop, muttered something apologetic to the maintenance log, and slipped inside. The space beyond was alive with quiet lightning. Pale, tendril-like plants grew in spirals across the floor and walls, pulsing with soft electrical charge. They sparked in rhythm with the station's artificial gravity hum, casting shimmering reflections across the curved glass dome above. Calasar Prime's orbit framed a slow-moving nebula outside, purple and silver clouds shifting like a slow breath. Princess Elari stood near the center of the room, one hand lightly brushing a stalk that responded with a crackle of gentle light. Her long ears twitched at the sound of the door closing. You're late. I was detained by a very enthusiastic sanitation bot, Elias said. It had opinions about my shoes. She didn't turn. I hope you did not disable it. I gave it a name and a reason to live. Now she looked at him, faintly amused. What name? Carl. Why Carl? He looked like a Carl. She studied him for a moment, then turned her attention back to the flora. They react to electromagnetic fields generated by neural patterns. Your presence disturbs them. I get that a lot. He took a cautious step forward. A glowing vine near his foot lit up and promptly curled inward like a shy cat. See, I'm great with plants. You're chaotic. Plants need excitement too. There was a beat of quiet. She didn't dismiss him. That was new. He stepped closer, pulled a foil-wrapped snack from his coat and held it up. Protein wafer. Seaweed and cinnamon. It's either delicious or a violation of at least 2 treaties. She accepted it without hesitation. He blinked. Really? You gave me algae chocolate. I have survived worse. They ate in silence for a moment. Outside, a satellite drifted past, trailing a stream of maintenance drones like lazy fireflies. So, he said, this is your rebellion spot. It is not rebellion. It's a little rebellion. It is solitude. Same thing if you're a royal. She didn't argue. She sat on the bench formed by twisted vines and let the light scatter over her armored sleeves. He joined her without asking. I don't understand you, she said finally. That's fair. You speak to me without fear. You ignore protocol. You bring snacks. I'm a complicated man. You wear boots with duct tape. I said complicated, not fashionable. She looked at him, head tilted. You are not what the Dominion would consider worthy company. That's funny. I've been told the same thing by vending machines. Her laugh was small but real. It crackled like the garden around them. He leaned back, arms behind his head, and stared up at the stars beyond the dome. Do you ever get tired of being terrifying? I am not terrifying. You vaped a drone mid-flight with your mind. That was protocol. You twitched your finger and melted a weaponized assassin. A very small assassin. Still melted. She glanced sideways at him, ears twitching faintly. Does that frighten you? Would it help your diplomatic image if I said yes? Yes. Then absolutely. I'm trembling. Look at this tremble. He held out his hand, perfectly steady, shaking like a quantum-stabilized leaf. She shook her head. You are not sane. I work on sewage filtration systems in orbit. Sanity's optional. They sat together in the glow for several minutes. The plants flickered in slow pulses, echoing heartbeats neither of them acknowledged. You know, he said eventually, back on Earth, I used to fix broken things in silence. Because it's peaceful. Because I didn't like people. You like me. I don't dislike you. She smiled again, but this time it held something softer, warmer. Why did you come sit beside me? She asked. You looked like you'd been weaponized by loneliness. I am never alone. I have guards, aides, advisors. And none of them know what kind of tea you like. She didn't answer. He looked at her. Storm gardens don't grow in safe places. Neither do engineers, she replied. A distant tremor shook the station. The lights dimmed briefly. Elias frowned. That wasn't normal. She stood, ears sharp with focus. External pressure variance, something shifted. Could be a docking failure, could be a breach. Could be another ambassador trying to test their anti-grav sports car. Inside the hangar, unscheduled arrival, no IFF signature, outer ring, suppressed report to command. Well, that's subtle. She turned to him. Come with me. Why me? Because you're the only one here. Right, that's a very fair point. They moved quickly. A hidden corridor beneath the garden led them into a maintenance shaft that curved through the station's understructure. Pipes hissed. Warning lights blinked uncertainly. Somewhere in the distance, a protocol AI muttered something about system inconsistencies and requested a supervisor's hug. Elias climbed out of the shaft and into a side terminal. He accessed a local feed, bypassed the security with the grace of a man who had done this too many times, and pulled up the visual from Dock 9B, a sleek, black ship. No registry, no diplomatic clearance, no landing gear. It hovered 2 inches above the deck like it didn't care about gravity, which, given the tech it used, it probably didn't. Ilari stared at the ship. That's Ilaran built. But not registered. No, that's not suspicious at all. She turned toward him. If they're here for me, they don't get you. You can't stop them. Maybe not, but I'm a great distraction. She frowned. You're not serious. I once used a bag of vacuum-sealed cheese to stop a reactor meltdown. That makes no sense. It didn't at the time either. The lights around them flickered. The ship's door hissed open. Figures stepped out, cloaked in mirrored armor and silence. Elias exhaled. So, snacks or sabotage? She extended her hand, palm upward. A faint glow pulsed from her skin. He grinned. Sabotage it is. Elias adjusted the tool belt around his waist like it was armor. Ilari moved ahead of him, eyes fixed on the mirror-armored figures now fanning out across Dock 9B. The ship they came from hummed with an energy signature too refined for standard transport. High-grade stealth plating. No insignia, no diplomatic beacon, which meant only one thing. Someone was cheating at space poker and brought plasma grenades to the table. Tell me again, Elias whispered, crouched behind a service cart stacked with magnetic cargo clamps, how we're not doing something wildly stupid. We are doing something wildly stupid, Ilari said. That's comforting. I like knowing where I stand on the spectrum between reasonable and set the toaster on fire with a fork. They are not official Dominion agents. The armor is wrong. Their formation is off. Their ears are too short. Fake ears, that's a bold move. Criminals often are. I feel personally attacked. You are not a criminal. I said I feel attacked. The nearest soldier paused and turned, scanning the corridor with a triangular visor that emitted a faint whine. Elias ducked instinctively. Question, he whispered. Do we have a plan? We improvise. Improvising is what people say right before running. Ilari closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, a pale shimmer ran down her arms. Her ears glowed faintly at the tips. Electricity sizzled across her fingers. I'll take left. Elias blinked. Right, great, and I'll just be somewhere else entirely. She stepped out. The first wave of stunned pulses hit the wall she'd already moved past. Her motion was elegant, dangerous, and unfairly fast. The air cracked as a pulse of psionic energy dropped two of the attackers like malfunctioning mannequins. Elias groaned and crawled toward the side panel of the dock's security terminal. The interface was a relic, probably last updated during the Galactic Spaghetti Accords, but it responded to his touch after a firm smack and a bit of polite swearing. Come on, he muttered. Give me something shiny. Give me turrets, give me, oh, hello there. The floor beneath the intruders shimmered and dropped 6 inches. A vibration plate triggered, and the emergency lockdown protocol sealed the hangar doors with a screech. From inside, muffled banging. Old maintenance trick, Elias said, mostly to himself. Distract them with confusion, trap them with bureaucracy. Ilari returned, her expression unreadable but her breathing faster than usual. You stunned 3, disabled 2, and what did you do to the last one? I offered him a protein bar. Did it work? He choked on it. Violent but effective. We need to leave before reinforcements arrive. Already on it. They made their way into the secondary lift shaft, bypassing the central elevators. Ilari used a short psionic burst to override the controls. Elias watched, mildly offended. You know, some of us still enjoy using wires. Wires don't respond to intent. They respond to chewing gum and sarcasm. The lift shuddered upward. Below, the intruders began to regroup. One of them activated a silent transmission. On level 3, the station's internal systems flickered again. This time, Elias noticed the glitch. That's the 3rd hiccup today. Something's piggybacking on the station's environmental network. Sabotage. Or malware with ambitions. Ilari frowned. What's the impact? Not sure, but if the toilets start giving weather forecasts, I'll know it succeeded. They exited the lift into a narrow corridor marked personnel access, level restricted. Elias unlocked it with a 6-digit override and an empty snack wrapper jammed into the scanner. Security on the station is improvable. It was designed by the Galactic Council. So a committee. Precisely. They reached a terminal hub with panoramic views of the station's outer ring. Ships docked in the distance. Small maintenance drones skittered along the surface like robotic insects, welding, scanning, blinking in overly cheerful colors. Elias scanned the logs. Our mystery ship entered through a ghost access port, one that shouldn't exist. Black channel. More like a backdoor someone forgot to patch. You can trace it. I can trace anything, if I had more coffee. She gestured. A drone zipped toward them carrying a cup. He took it, stared at it, then at her. You summoned coffee. It's in my diplomatic authority. That is by far the most useful application of nobility I've ever seen. He worked fast. The trail led to a storage cell 4 decks below. When the scan hit the encryption lock, the console buzzed like a dying bee. Encrypted, Dominion grade, but not current protocols. She narrowed her eyes. That's old war era code. Someone's digging up the past. The comms panel blinked. A transmission was coming through, low-band analog frequency. Elias patched it in. A voice, distorted and filtered through static, filled the space. Your alliance is unauthorized. Your contact with the human violates the contingency mandate. Disengage or consequences will escalate. Elias stared at the panel. Well, that's ominous. Elari leaned in. Trace it. He tapped a few keys. The signal bounced through 10 relays before burning out, but not fast enough. Got it. Cargo Bay 12. They moved again, taking the emergency maintenance crawlspace. Elias talked as they went, mostly to distract from the fact that the floor panels kept sparking. When I was a kid, I thought space diplomacy was about peace and poetry. Turns out it's mostly paperwork, explosions, and awkward flirtation in dangerous gardens. This is not flirtation. I offered you a protein wafer. That's not a cultural signal of affection. It is where I'm from. She said nothing, but her ears twitched again. They reached the bay. Inside, crates of obsolete Dominion tech were stacked like forgotten relics. A faint hum came from the far corner. The source, a spherical device half buried in cables. It pulsed with a frequency not used in 100 years. Inside, something old was waking up. Elias whistled. That's not just tech, that's a war relic. An echo core, Elari said. They were banned. This one isn't just active. It's broadcasting. Broadcasting what? He stared at the screen. Your memories. She froze. They're splicing your neural patterns into a synthetic thought stream, packaging them. Someone selling your mind like a data show. She stepped forward, slow and controlled. Her hand glowed. The device began to vibrate. Then Elias said, wait. She looked at him. I can trace where the signal's going. We can find who's behind it. If you destroy it now, we lose the lead. Her hand hovered. I know it's invasive. I know it's cruel. But if we stop this here, it happens again somewhere else. If we follow it. We make it end, she finished. He nodded. She stepped back. Fine, but if it tries to replicate, I will crush it. Fair. They turned to leave. A final beep came from the console. Secondary signal just went live, Elias muttered. From where? He stared at the data, grim. Earth. The human delegation arrived late. Not fashionably late. Catastrophically late. Their shuttle docked upside down somehow, and the chief ambassador exited wearing 2 left boots and a tie that actively tried to strangle him. Elias watched from the top row of the summit chamber, sipping something green that tasted vaguely of moss and optimism. Elari sat beside him, radiating serenity and subtle menace, which was apparently her default. Below them, delegates buzzed like flies around a buffet, circling the topic everyone was pretending didn't exist. That someone had weaponized stolen neural fragments from an alien princess and broadcast them from Earth. The evidence was unambiguous. Elias had traced the signal's bounce through 3 deep space relays, 1 coffee shop Wi-Fi router, and a decommissioned weather balloon that had somehow become a low-orbit data pirate. The culprit was an Earth-based syndicate posing as a tech startup. Neurotrend slogan. We think for you TM. Their founder, a man named Calvin Trusk, now sat at the defense table in a suit made of nanosilk and poor decisions. The speaker floated to the center of the chamber. "We are convened," it said, voice modulated to appeal equally to all known auditory preferences, which meant it sounded like a polite avalanche. Calvin stood, cleared his throat, and said, "There's been a misunderstanding." Elias leaned toward Elari. "This'll be good." "We never intended to violate Alaran's sovereignty," Calvin continued. "We merely believed that Princess Elari's cultural memory streams were, open source." Elari blinked once, very slowly. Elias could almost hear the execution orders drafting themselves in the Dominion's legal AI. "We didn't steal them," Calvin added, sweating slightly. "We harvested ambient psychic data. It's a known practice." "You harvested her mind," Elias said loudly, standing up. "Not ambient noise. Unless you think people's thoughts are just lying around like interstellar vending machine tokens." The chamber stirred. The Afiri delegate nodded solemnly and muttered something about brain theft etiquette. The speaker looked at Elias. "You are not a registered diplomat." "Nope." "Then by what right do you address this council?" He looked at Elari. She gave a barely perceptible nod. "By invitation," Elias said. The room fell silent. Elari stood. "Neurotrends actions constitute psychic violation, cultural desecration, and an act of informational war," she said. "They didn't just copy my memories, they sold them, translated them into interactive dreams, turned my childhood into entertainment, my fears into subscriptions." Calvin tried to interject, but one look from her made his words crawl back down his throat and apply for early retirement. "I am not content to destroy the device," she continued. "I will dismantle the system, and I will begin by re-educating those responsible." The council buzzed again. Elias cleared his throat. "Might I propose a compromise?" Everyone turned. "Let her sentence them," he said, pointing at Calvin. "But let it be poetic. Put them in a containment loop with one of their own dream sequences. Force them to live in the garbage version of her memories. The ones where she's 12 and has allergies and loses a chess match to her cousin." "That is oddly specific," Elari said. "I read the file." "And you think this is justice?" "I think it's hilarious." She considered, accepted. Calvin screamed once, then the Dominion guards activated the neural coil. His body slumped peacefully as his consciousness was uploaded to the simulation. One of the Delvaxians clapped. Later in the quiet garden beneath the observation ring, Elias sat with Elari again. This time, there were no guards watching, no hidden transmissions, just a slow drift of stars outside and the hum of plants learning to trust the silence again. "They'll rebuild,"